Today, let's talk about the manipulation of information from the government. We learned recently, we actually kind of knew this, that the U.S. government had been colluding with researchers at a university on something called the EIP, the Election Integrity Partnership, that targeted many prominent individuals with suppression of their speech in violation of our First Amendment rights. And I say our because I was a target as well. On my Wikipedia page, it actually says that I was labeled a super spreader of misinformation. They never actually explained what that was. And I believe one of the things they stated a long time ago was that I retweeted somebody. I think I remember something that came up and they were like, you are a super spreader. And I was like, what happened? They're like, you retweeted Jack Posobiec. And I was like, and? What does that mean? Well, you spread misinformation. And a super spreader because I got a lot of tweets. And I'm like, one time, one thing? But it is rather vague. You also are aware that I use something called Newsguard. Why? Well, the logic is fairly obvious. Newsguard rates websites with trust, determining whether or not you can believe what the news outlet says. Okay. So here's my position. I started using Newsguard because it's their bias metric. Apparently, they've received funding from the government, and now we're trying to determine who is telling the truth and who is not. Newsguard has lied about Timcast and misrepresented what we do. It's actually quite fascinating that they do this, but, they do. And for this reason, they're worthy of criticism. But the issue now is that anybody who's basically anti-establishment, critical of vaccines, critical of Democrats, is often labeled dangerous fake news. And thus, there is a lawsuit from Consortium News against Newsguard, which I will read, which is absolutely fascinating in the past couple of weeks. Now, why do I use it? Because if I'm using news that says like Hunter Biden laptop, etc., and it's coming from a Newsguard certified source, how are you going to call me misinformation or a super spreader, blah, blah, blah. This actually ended up coming to a head in the most fascinating way when Newsguard themselves claimed that Timcast.com published fake news, to which I responded with, here are two Newsguard certified sources asserting it's true. Have a nice day. Boy, they didn't like that one. They went, oopsie daisy. Because if I can't trust your certifications, it destroys your entire narrative, doesn't it? Well, here's the game. Real Clear Wire says, Newsguard, surrogate the feds pay to keep watch on the internet and be the judge of truth. Oh, yeah. So I don't want to go too much into this because this is just kind of like a profile on Newsguard, but they talk about how there was an attempt to basically sell this to Twitter in 2021. And now that there is a lawsuit happening, they say, instead of merely suggesting rebuttals to untrustworthy information, as many other existing anti-misinformation groups do, Newsguard has built a business model out of broad labels that classify entire news sites as safe or untrustworthy, using an individual grading system producing what it calls nutrition labels. I want to say this. Recently, Newsguard downgraded Timcast from 82.5%, I believe it was, to 69.5%. Because they claimed they reached out for some corrections and we didn't respond. That is not true. As far as I can tell, and according to my staff, they never did. A dirty game they play. When Newsguard initially rated Timcast.com, their nutrition label, they call it, was so laden with insane errors, they had to issue multiple corrections and apologies in the span of a couple days. And to this day, their statements about me still have many inaccuracies, and they don't care and they won't correct it. Critics note that such ratings are entirely subjective. Now, why does this matter? What this organization does is contact advertisers to get money pulled, basically. Like, don't advertise on these misinformation websites. Oh, yeah, that's defamation that directly impacts the revenue of a company. Newsguard is going to get sued into oblivion. I can't imagine Newsguard can exist. Sorry, I just don't think it can exist. There's one lawsuit so far, but I imagine you can't go up against everyone and win. What do we have? Okay, so basically anyone who's anti-establishment is getting negative ratings. The Federalist is at 12.5%. I do think Federalist has posted some fake news, for sure. But the New York Times has posted massive and tremendously influential fake news pertaining to Russiagate. How about the fire extinguisher hoax on January 6th? And they get a 100%. Oh, boy. You see where this is going. Critics notes that the ratings are subjective. The New York Times, for example, which repeatedly carried false and partisan information from anonymous sources during the Russiagate hoax, gets a 100% rating. Real Clear Investigations, which took heat in 2019 for unmasking the whistleblower in the first Trump impeachment, has an 80% rating. Independent news outlets like Anti-War is 49.5 and The Federalist 12.5. This is the best example here. Consortium News, independent investigative journalism and political review since 1995. Newsguard says, proceed with caution, 47.5%. The website generally fails to maintain basic standards of accuracy and accountability. What does that mean? Well, according to Consortium News, it means that of the 30,000+ articles they've written, Newsguard is concerned about 6. I can attest to this. Timcast.com had, at the time of initial review, somewhere around 4,000 articles for which we routinely issue corrections. And the concern was over, I think, 5. I think it was 2 that we issued direct clarifications, not outright corrections. One might have been a correction. One was a clarification that we thought, fair point, we'll clarify if you think it should be clarified. No issues there. And several of the articles, a couple of them that they'd issue with was that we quoted Donald Trump. That's right. What we had done is Donald Trump came out and said something where he was like, as president, I did this and I did that. And we said, Trump claims he did this and did that. And they said, the fact that you published Trump's statements without a fact check makes you irresponsible. And I said, what we posted was 100% factually correct in every way. We did not issue a fact check. We were letting people know that Trump had a rally where he said these things. People should know he's saying these things. I'm not doing a fact check on Trump. You can find someone who is. And they said, no, you have to. If you don't, we are going to strike your page, your website, and claim you're irresponsible. And so I said, okay, how about this? We will issue a fact check. And they said, too bad. The fact that you published them at all makes you irresponsible. And they refused to correct it. That's interesting because what they're trying to do is take our money from us and make sure nobody wants to sponsor our website. That is directly attacking our bottom line. Here's Consortium News. They say the United States government and internet watchdog Newsguard Tech were sued in federal court in Manhattan for First Amendment violations and defamation by the news organization Consortium for Independent Journalism, a nonprofit that publishes Consortium News. Consortium News' court filing charges the Pentagon Cyber Command, an element of the intelligence community, with contracting Newsguard to identify, report, and abridge the speech of American media organizations that dissent from U.S. official positions on foreign policy. In the course of its contract with the Pentagon, Newsguard is acting jointly or in concert with the U.S. to coerce news organizations to alter viewpoints. I believe that is 100% factually correct. We were coerced. Timcast.com was threatened, coerced, attacked, and assaulted by Newsguard. They basically came to us and said, unless you put these things in your articles, we will do everything in our power to make sure advertisers don't give you money. I feel like that's blackmail because the things they're asserting are false. I'll prove it. Or I should say, for the sake of argument, I will give you my thoughts. And then should we get to something in court, we'll provide the more direct proof. But the issue is simply this. As I mentioned, they made claims that we published false information about Hunter Biden and the laptop story and his work in Ukraine, despite the fact that our sources were news outlets that were certified by Newsguard themselves, including the New York Post, the Daily Mail. Not to mention some of the things we said were confirmed by the New York Times. And they told us we had to change it. And I said, but this comes from your certified sources. You see, they immediately backed down. But then when it came to a business practice, fact check Donald Trump or else, our company was put in the position of, but we were factually correct in what we reported. Doesn't matter. They will take your advertising revenue by threatening and defaming you and lying about you unless you do as they say. I believe that's extortion. Imagine going to a news outlet and saying, I am going to interfere with your business practice, tortious interference, unless you say what I demand you say. Wow, that's not a free press. But now that we're learning that the Pentagon has actually contracted Newsguard, we now know this is a large component of the U.S. efforts, the government efforts to suppress information they don't like. They say the First Amendment rights of all American media are threatened with this arrangement with the Defense Department to defame and abridge the speech of U.S. media groups. When media groups are condemned by the government as anti-U.S. and accused of publishing false content because they disagree with U.S. policies, the result is self-censorship. They say, a correction, it was not 30,000, it was 20,000. Newsguard uses its software to tag targeted news sites, including all 20,000 plus Consortium articles and videos published since 1995 with warnings to proceed with caution, telling subscribers that Consortium News produces disinformation. It's not just about their subscribers, it's about advertising agencies. And they say, even though Newsguard only took issue with a total of 6 articles and none of its videos. This is why I believe we must, every single one of all the outlets should be filing lawsuits against Newsguard. And I'd like to hear what Consortium News is working on. I'd like to contact any, including leftist publications, and say, let us not allow the U.S. government to contract with a private company to lie, smear, and defame anyone who disagrees with them. And for that, you can take a look, especially at the vaccine and medical debate, that what is happening with Newsguard is that if the government says it, it's true. But that's not how reality works. If journalists are supposed to challenge those in power, that means often the government and the media will be at odds with each other. But if Newsguard simply asserts that when it comes to medical facts, the government is always right, then they are effectively working as an arm of the government to suppress dissent. And for this, everyone's got to sue. Everyone's got to shut down. Why? It's not just about this one company. It's about any company that would ever try to do something like this. They say Newsguard's labeling of Consortium News as publishing false content is challenged in detail in the substantial complaint. The suit comes at a time when many in Congress and elsewhere have charged the U.S. government with using private entities and internet platforms as proxies to suppress free speech, and they've done it. So I'm not super familiar with Consortium, but shout out to the lawsuit they're filing. And more companies are starting to stand up and call them out for being an arm of the intelligence agencies. Now, early on, I liked Newsguard, and I said, let's, for the reasons outlined earlier, I will use them. And then Newsguard decided to lie about me. And I said, hold on. Every article I use in all of my videos is Newsguard certified. And if that's the case, why are you accusing me of being irresponsible? Because they are politically motivated, evil people who are not interested in what's true. They're interested in silencing dissent. Ah, now you get it. Now I'll still use Newsguard certified sources for that point. So that when even Newsguard tries to claim we're lying, I'll have to just point to their own certified sources. Sorry, you said these sources were good, so I used them. Now you're mad? Oh, yeah, they backed down on that one really quickly, realizing if they tried to assert that their certifications are no good, what are you going to do about it? So let's see. If Real Clear Investigations is rated at, Real Clear Politics is rated 80%, and in one of their investigations, they expose you for misinformation. Uh-oh! You see, the system is impossible to maintain, and it should be destroyed. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.